There is a specific kind of destruction that fire alone cannot produce. Something that doesn't just burn, it erases. It turns buildings into craters, ships into vapor, and the ground itself into a hole you could park a house in. Something so violent that the people closest to it should not, by any reasonable calculation, still be alive to describe what they saw. The explosions we are counting down today were not close calls. They were not situations where things almost got bad. They were events where the force released was so enormous, the destruction so absolute, that the survival of anyone within range defies straightforward explanation. Where investigators looking at the blast radius and the debris field and the crater measurements come to the same conclusion. The people who walked away from this should not have walked away. We are talking about explosions that registered on seismographs hundreds of miles away. Explosions that vaporized entire ships and left nothing identifiable behind. Explosions that should have taken everyone in the building, in the factory, on the pier, on the dock, and somehow, incomprehensibly, didn't. Every single entry on this list changed something permanently. A law was passed, a safety regulation was written, a procedure was overhauled, because the only thing that comes out of an explosion this size, if anything comes out at all, is the hard and terrible knowledge of exactly what should never be allowed to happen again. Number 7. The New London School Explosion, Texas, March 18th, 1937. It is 3:17 in the afternoon and class is almost over and the school year is almost done. And in the basement of the London School in New London, Texas, a shop teacher named Lemmy Butler turns on an electric sander, and the spark from that switch finds the gas-air mixture that has been pooling silently in the enclosed crawl space beneath the entire length of the building all day. And the school, a $1 million steel and concrete building that the community of New London was enormously proud of, lifts off its foundation and comes back down. The London School is one of the wealthiest rural school districts in the United States, built on East Texas oil money, and it is a showpiece. Steel frame, concrete construction, the most modern facility for miles. And in January of 1937, school administrators had made a cost-cutting decision to tap a free residue gas line from a nearby oil company rather than pay their $300 monthly gas bill. The gas was odorless, the connection was faulty, and through the winter and into the spring, it had been leaking silently into the sealed crawl space under the building, while students walked the halls above it and complained of headaches that nobody investigated. Here's the worst part. When the building came down, witnesses described children buried under collapsed concrete and steel, arms and legs visible in the rubble, a 2-ton concrete slab thrown 200 feet through the air, and a blackboard found intact in the wreckage with a teacher's lesson still chalked on it. Oil and natural gas are East Texas' greatest blessings. Without them, this school would not be here. The explosion was heard 4 miles away. A temporary morgue was set up on school grounds. Oilfield roughnecks from the surrounding area arrived within minutes and dug through the rubble through the night with their bare hands, because they were the only people nearby who knew how to work in structural collapse. Here's the kicker. Nearly 300 students and teachers are gone. But the reason this explosion is not on every list of American tragedies is the same reason it happened in the first place. Nobody knew the gas was there. Natural gas in 1937 was odorless and colorless, completely undetectable. Within weeks of the explosion, the Texas legislature passed a law requiring that an odor be added to all natural gas for commercial and industrial use. The distinctive rotten egg smell that has warned millions of people of a gas leak ever since, the smell that has saved countless lives, exists because of what happened at 3:17 in the afternoon in New London, Texas on March 18, 1937. The Pepcon disaster, Henderson, Nevada, May 4, 1988. A welder is making a routine repair in a building at the Pacific Engineering and Production Company of Nevada, and a spark from his torch finds the ammonium perchlorate stored inside. And what follows is described by NASA as the largest domestic non-nuclear explosion in recorded American history at the time. An event that registers on seismographs 600 miles away, buffers a Boeing 737 on final approach at McCarran Airport 7 miles out, and knocks a man off his feet on the 30th floor of the Las Vegas Hilton. Pepcon manufactures ammonium perchlorate, the oxidizer in solid rocket fuel, the same chemical that powers the booster rockets of the space shuttle. And because the Challenger disaster in 1986 has grounded the shuttle program for 2 years and production has continued, there are approximately 4,500 tons of the material stockpiled at the Henderson facility on the morning of May 4, 1988, all of it stored in polyethylene drums with aluminum liners on a plant occupying less than 15 acres, with buildings separated by fewer than 50 feet, sitting in what has become a densely populated suburban area near Las Vegas. Here's the worst part. The facility has accumulated 30 OSHA safety violations since 1974. The building where the fire starts has burned before. And ammonium perchlorate has been classified not as an explosive but as a Class 4 oxidizer, a regulatory distinction that means the storage rules are significantly looser than the actual danger justifies. When the fire starts and the first explosion goes off, company controller Roy Westerfield, 62 years old, stays behind after everyone else evacuates to call 911 and request every available unit. His body is never recovered. Plant manager Bruce Halker uses a wheelchair and cannot escape in time. He is the only other person who does not make it out. Everyone else, approximately 75 employees, survives. Here's the kicker. The main crater is 15 feet deep and 200 feet long. Damage extends 10 miles in every direction. The shockwave demolishes the adjacent Kid Marshmallow factory, shatters windows across the Las Vegas Valley, and causes an estimated $100 million in damage. 372 people are injured, and 2 people are gone from an explosion that the evidence suggests should have taken everyone on the property. The first blast gave them just enough time to run. Roy Westerfield used that time to call for help instead. Number 5. The West Fertilizer Plant Explosion, Texas, April 17, 2013. It is 10 p.m. on a Wednesday night in the small town of West Texas, and the West Fertilizer Company plant is on fire. And the first responders are there, and the residents nearest to the plant have been evacuated. And then the ammonium nitrate stored inside detonates, and the explosion is measured as a 2.1 magnitude seismic event, and the blast wave levels a 14-block radius. And the same disaster that destroyed Texas City 66 years earlier has just happened again in the same state with the same compound and the same result. The West plant stores ammonium nitrate, the same material that triggered the Texas City disaster in 1947. It has not informed the Department of Homeland Security that it stores more than 400 pounds of the compound, which is the legal threshold requiring notification. It is storing approximately 40 tons. The last safety inspection of the facility was in 2006. The plant has no sprinkler system. When the fire starts, first responders have no way of knowing what they are walking toward, because the information that would have told them, the federal notification that a facility of this type stores this amount of this material, has never been filed. Here's the worst part. 12 of the 15 people who lose their lives are first responders. They are firefighters and emergency medical technicians who drove toward the fire because that is what first responders do, without knowing they were walking into the blast radius of 40 tons of ammonium nitrate about to detonate. The explosion destroys a nursing home, an apartment complex, and a middle school. 150 buildings are damaged or destroyed. The crater is 93 feet wide and 10 feet deep, and the reason the death toll is not higher is that many of the nearest residents had already been evacuated, pushed away from the fire before the detonation by the same first responders who stayed behind. Here's the kicker. A congressional investigation after West finds that the United States has no comprehensive federal system requiring facilities to notify emergency responders about hazardous chemical storage. Thousands of facilities across the country store materials similar to what was at the West plant without any requirement to tell the local fire department what is inside. West, Texas is 66 years after Texas City, the same compound, the same result, the same finding that warning signs existed and were not acted on. Number 4. The Port Chicago Disaster, California, July 17, 1944. It is 10:18 in the evening at the Port Chicago Naval Magazine, 30 miles north of San Francisco, and 2 cargo ships, the SSEA Bryan and the SS Quinault Victory, are being loaded with munitions at the pier. The Bryan is nearly full. Bombs, depth charges, incendiary devices, ammunition of every type, 4,600 tons of it in the hold. And the men loading it are African-American Navy enlisted men who have never been trained in munitions handling, who are being pressured by their officers to load faster, who are competing in informal races that their officers have organized to drive up the loading speed. And then the entire pier disappears. The explosion is equivalent to 5,000 tons of TNT. It registers 3.4 on the Richter scale. It is felt in San Francisco 40 miles away, and as far as Boulder City, Nevada, 430 miles to the south. The Bryan is obliterated, not destroyed, obliterated. Of the 320 people who are on or near the pier when it goes off, only 51 bodies remain intact enough to be positively identified. A 45-ton diesel locomotive evaporates. Large pieces of the Quinault Victory are found 500 yards away in the bay. The search for survivors becomes a recovery operation within minutes because there are almost no survivors to find near the pier itself. Here's the worst part. In the days after the explosion, the white officers at Port Chicago are given 30-day hardship leaves. The black enlisted men who survived are given no leave, are assigned to clean up the devastated base, including recovering the remains of their dead colleagues, and are then ordered to report to the Mare Island Naval Yard in Vallejo to resume loading munitions, without any additional training, without any change in the safety conditions that produced the disaster, without any explanation of what caused the explosion. 258 of them refuse. 50 are charged with mutiny. All 50 are convicted. They are sentenced to 8 to 15 years of hard labor and dishonorable discharge. The NAACP sends Thurgood Marshall to observe the court-martial, and Marshall's statement afterward is direct. This is not 50 men on trial for mutiny. This is the Navy on trial for its entire policy toward black sailors. Here's the kicker. The Port Chicago disaster accounts for almost 20% of all black naval casualties during the entire Second World War. The men who loaded those ships had received no training, no protective equipment, and no information about what they were handling. The Longshoremen's Union had warned that a catastrophe was imminent before the explosion ever happened, and the 50 men convicted of mutiny for refusing to return to those conditions serve years in federal prison before being released when the war ends. In July of 2024, 80 years after the explosion, the United States Navy formally exonerates all 256 defendants. It takes 80 years to acknowledge that the men who refused to load the munitions were right. Number 3. The Texas City Disaster. Texas, April 16, 1947. It is 8:30 in the morning, and crowds have gathered at the waterfront of Texas City to watch the SS Grand Camp burn. The fire started in the cargo hold overnight, and the ship's captain has ordered it sealed and steam smothered rather than flooded with water because the cargo is ammonium nitrate fertilizer and he does not want it to get wet. The entire Texas City Volunteer Fire Department is on the dock fighting the fire. Spectators are on the waterfront, workers are at the nearby Monsanto chemical plant, and a 9-year-old girl named Rachel Hernandez is watching the smoke with her aunt. "It was so beautiful," she says later. "It was black and orange and just really pretty." At 9:12 a.m., the Grand Camp detonates. The explosion is one of the largest non-nuclear blasts in human history. 2 planes flying overhead are blown out of the sky. A 2,000-pound anchor is thrown 2 miles. Witnesses in Galveston, 10 miles away, are knocked off their feet. The Monsanto chemical plant explodes. Nearby oil storage tanks explode. And then, 15 hours later, a second ship, the High Flyer, which had also been carrying ammonium nitrate and had been on fire since the first explosion, detonates. Together, the 2 explosions kill at least 581 people and injure more than 5,000. Every single member of the Texas City Volunteer Fire Department who responded to the initial call is gone. Here's the worst part. The Port of Houston had banned the loading of ammonium nitrate fertilizer in 1946, the year before this disaster, because of concerns about its explosive potential. Texas City had no such ban. The Grand Camp's captain chose steam smothering over flooding specifically to protect the cargo, a decision that allowed pressure and heat to build inside the sealed hold until detonation became inevitable. And the facility had no disaster preparedness plan, not a missing or inadequate plan, but no plan at all, which even in 1947 was regarded by contemporaries as inadequate. Here's the kicker. 112 people are found alive within 500 feet of the Grand Camp when it explodes. 112. The blast radius should have made survival at that distance essentially impossible, and yet they are there, pulled from the wreckage, burned and injured and changed forever, but alive. Survivors describe the scene afterward as comparable to the atomic bombings of Nagasaki and Hiroshima. Rescue workers use the high school gym as a morgue. Fires burn for a week. Body recovery takes nearly a month, and 63 of the identified dead are never identified at all, buried in a memorial cemetery under markers that cannot tell you who they were. Number 2. The Bath School Disaster. Michigan, May 18, 1927. The school year is almost over. It is a Thursday morning in Bath Township, Michigan, a farming community of about 300 people 10 miles from Lansing. The Bath Consolidated School has 314 students. The school board treasurer is a man named Andrew Kehoe, a tinkerer, a former electrician, an angry man who has spent the past year losing an election for township clerk, watching his farm face foreclosure, and blaming the school's property taxes for his financial ruin. He has also spent that year hiding dynamite and a World War I explosive called pyritol in the crawl space beneath the school's north wing. A few pounds at a time, during the maintenance work that gave him unsupervised access to the building. At 9:45 in the morning, the alarm clock he has wired to the charges goes off. The north wing of the Bath Consolidated School collapses. 36 children and 2 teachers are gone in the initial blast. As rescue workers, parents, and neighbors converge on the school and begin pulling children from the rubble, a Model T truck pulls up to the schoolyard. A survivor who had just walked past Kehoe that morning remembers him smiling at her as she went into school. He is sitting in the truck. The truck is packed with dynamite and metal fragments. He fires a rifle into it. Here's the worst part. During the search and recovery operation, rescuers find an additional 500 pounds of unexploded dynamite in the south wing of the school, a second set of charges that failed to go off because a short circuit in the wiring interrupted the detonation sequence. Investigators later determined that the short circuit was almost certainly caused by the first explosion, knocking out the electrical connection. Andrew Kehoe intended to destroy the entire school. The only reason the south wing is standing, the only reason the death toll is not double or triple what it is a piece of wiring that failed at exactly the right moment, entirely by chance. Here's the kicker. The Bath school disaster remains the deadliest act of mass violence at a school in United States history. Nearly a century later, no school attack has surpassed its death toll. 38 children are gone, most of them between 7 and 12 years old. A sign is found wired to the fence at Kehoe's burned-out farm after the disaster. It reads, "Criminals are made, not born." Willis Cressman, a survivor who is 97 years old when he is interviewed decades later, says, "You wouldn't think a church member could do such a thing, would you? He was the caretaker of the school. In fact, I saw him that morning. He was working on a door, and he smiled at us as we walked in." Number 1. The Deepwater Horizon, Gulf of Mexico, April 20th, 2010. It is 9:45 at night on the Deepwater Horizon drilling rig, and the crew has just finished a key test on the Macondo wellbore 1 mile below the surface of the Gulf of Mexico. And the test results are being misread. And deep below the sea floor, the pressure of the oil and gas is already moving upward through the drill column. And by the time the crew realizes what is happening, the gas has already reached the rig floor and the blowout preventer, the last safety device standing between the well and the surface, fails to close, and the gas finds the ignition sources on the drill floor. And the Deepwater Horizon, a rig the size of 2 football fields floating in the Gulf of Mexico, becomes a fireball visible from 40 miles away. There are 126 people on the Deepwater Horizon when it explodes. 11 of them are gone in the initial blast and fire. 115 survive. They survive a fireball that engulfs one of the largest offshore drilling platforms in the world, that burns for 36 hours before the rig sinks, that destroys a structure weighing 32,000 tons. They survive by jumping from the rig into the Gulf of Mexico in the middle of the night, sometimes from heights of 10 stories, into water that is on fire in places from burning oil, and swimming or floating until rescue vessels reach them. The survival accounts from the Deepwater Horizon describe people on fire, people with broken bones from the jump, people floating in the dark for hours in water they cannot see the edge of, waiting for a light that might never come. Here's the worst part. The blowout preventer, the device designed specifically to prevent this exact event, had a dead battery in its control pod and a hydraulic leak that prevented it from closing the well. BP's own internal risk assessment had identified problems with the Macondo well in the weeks before the explosion. A key safety test conducted hours before the blowout produced results that multiple crew members flagged as abnormal, but the decision was made to proceed. And Halliburton, the cement contractor responsible for sealing the well, had its own internal tests showing the cement job was likely to fail. The results of those tests are not shared with the rig crew. 11 people are gone from a disaster that at least 3 separate organizations had information suggesting was coming. Here's the kicker. The Deepwater Horizon sinks on April 22nd, and the Macondo well bleeds oil into the Gulf of Mexico for 87 days, the largest accidental marine oil spill in history, releasing approximately 210 million gallons of crude oil before the well is capped on July 15th. The 11 men who are gone in the initial explosion are the first casualties of a disaster that ultimately affects thousands of miles of coastline, hundreds of thousands of people whose livelihoods depend on the Gulf, and an ecosystem that scientists are still assessing the damage to today, and 115 people who should not have survived the night of April 20th, 2010, are alive because they jumped into the dark water and held on. 115 7 explosions. 7 moments where the force released was so catastrophic that survival seemed like an impossibility. And yet people survived anyway. Some survived because the first blast gave them just enough time to run, like the Pepcon workers who cleared the plant before the main detonation. Some survived because a piece of faulty wiring failed at exactly the right moment, like the 500 pounds of unexploded dynamite in the south wing of the Bath School. Some survived by jumping into dark water and waiting for a light to find them, like the 115 people who made it off the Deepwater Horizon. And some survived simply by being in the wrong place, in slightly the right way, a few feet further from the pier, a few steps away from the blast, close enough to feel it and far enough to survive it. What connects all 7 is not just the violence of what happened. It is the paper trail that runs in front of every single one. The inspection reports, the safety citations, the flagged test results, the warnings that came before the explosion and were not acted on. Every entry on this list has that paper trail. Every one of them has a moment where the information that could have prevented the disaster existed, and someone decided not to act on it. That is the thing that makes these explosions more than just catastrophes. That is what makes them preventable. And that is what makes the people who survived them not just lucky, but witnesses to something that should never have been allowed to happen in the first place. Sleep tight.